Hey, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with the Coach. Today our first question comes from AJ8873 who says, Hey Ramsey, if there was a combat sport with no rules and no equipment, how would people train for it and what would sparring look like in that sport? Okay, AJ, what you're describing is very similar to the original UFC and the original Vale Tudo fights they had in Brazil with no rules. So back then people really didn't know how to train for it, they didn't know what the sport was supposed to look like. Today, what you're describing is actually extremely similar to modern mixed martial arts. I think the biggest differences wouldn't even be the exclusion of fouls, no eye pokes or groin kicks or whatever. It would be no time limits, no weight classes. Okay, so what we would see is people trying to be as big but as efficient as possible, and we would see a greater emphasis on grappling, specifically controlling somebody. In modern mixed martial arts, what really makes a big difference is the rounds. You got a 5-minute round, okay? And it takes an average of 2 minutes to get that first takedown, which leaves you 3 minutes to fight on the ground, if your opponent stays on the ground. And statistically, they tend to get up a couple of times. And so those fights tend to continue a while, and it gives a certain advantage to the mixed martial artist who excels at striking. I'm not saying you don't need to know grappling, you absolutely do for modern mixed martial arts. But it gives a very specific advantage to strikers who are able to get back up or stuff a takedown. But if you've got an unlimited round, no time limits, that grappler has time to do some work. So if they manage to get up, okay. Outlast them, overpower them, control them, squish them, and you can stall. Modern mixed martial arts doesn't allow stalling on the ground, so if you just squish a guy on the floor and there's no action going on, the ref will stand you back up. If you look at the original no rules fights, some of those went on for a half hour. Just a dude laying on the other guy, squishing him, doing very little except control. So the fights would start to get really boring again. And as far as the striking goes, well, look at boxing. Like 100 to 150 years ago, when bare knuckle boxing or non-padded gloves were a thing. Because people got really, really careful. There was no reckless punching. They added the gloves not for the safety of the fighters, it's so they wouldn't break their hands and turn into boring fights where people were being careful, because that's not exciting to watch. So while the prospect of a no-rules fight sounds really fun, the reality of it is a lot more boring than what you think. So you might think, oh, we'd see a lot of groin kicks and groin strikes and all that, and that would instantly stop a lot of matches, and sure, it might end some, but I mean, look at Keith Hackney and Joe Son. Let me see if I can put that up on the screen right here. Yeah, right there. How many times did Keith punch Joe Son straight in the groin? Now I know he's not in a great position. Today, modern grapplers would capitalize on that and do much worse things than punch him in the groin. Believe it or not, that's a thing you can do. But yeah, Joe Son wasn't letting go. Anyway, so, yeah, we'd see groin kicks, absolutely, but anyway, the second part of your question, how would people train for this? I think they train for it very similarly to the way that modern mixed martial arts train for their fights, but they put an extra emphasis on endurance training. I think they do a lot of extended wrestling matches to up their endurance and up their ability to control somebody for long periods of time. Put them in a position where they can't strike or eye poke or bite or any of that stuff. Whereas, the guy on top can do some horrible, nasty things little by little and eke out a victory. I also think we'd see a lot of guys getting tired, like really tired. Again, watch those old UFC fights, the ones that went on for like 30, 40 minutes, sometimes an hour. And those guys would get so tired they wouldn't be able to really do anything except plod along. Yeah, so For the most part, I would say the fewer rules, the better. But at the same time, time limits within reason are there for a very important purpose as a spectator and as a fan of the sport. Next question. Our next question comes from some D6 who left a comment on my video, what does a fighter eat in a day, where I showed a day of what I eat, a fairly typical example, ton of protein, a lot of different meals, a lot of food, a lot of calories. And he says, what do you eat when you decide to cheat? And I'll give you a very simple answer to that. I don't cheat. I don't have cheat meals. I don't live a life that I want a vacation from. And that's true with what I eat. It's true with what I do for a living. It's true with how I spend my time. I don't live a life that I want a vacation from. And that includes my food. Next question. Our next question comes from our friend Josue Castillo, who says, he's from Mexico. Hola, amigo mexicano, ¿cómo estás? He says he's willing to start MMA. He has a background in Taekwondo. He's got a red belt, that's the rank right before black belt in World Taekwondo. And he's done a number of point-based competitions. He attended some Hapkido seminars and some K-PAP sessions. I'm not familiar with that martial art. He says, my condition is not there yet. Should I continue strength and conditioning, training myself prior to a point of physical confidence so I can take full advantage of entering any MMA center? And what are the things I need to look at before doing so? Making sure I'm not going to learn useless things. Okay. Yes, you should absolutely do some physical training. You know, lift weights, squat, deadlift, do pull-ups, do some basic powerlifting, you know, all that good stuff. That's great, and you should always consistently do that to get as strong as you physically can, and that will give you an extreme advantage. At the same time, don't tell yourself, I'm gonna start training when I feel like I'm at this professional level or whatever. You know, if you're a red belt in Taekwondo, you know, you're physically competent enough to go take an MMA class. You're gonna be fine. All right, you're gonna learn all kinds of new things. You're gonna be put in all these crazy positions you're not familiar with, and you might feel like, oh man, I'm not ready yet. But you won't get ready for that kind of gym in a different kind of gym. So go to the MMA gym, start learning. Okay, lift weights at the same time, get as strong as you can at the same time. And you'll start to find connections between weightlifting and fitness training and mixed martial arts training that you might not have seen otherwise. The next part of your question was, what do you actually look for in an MMA training center when you go there to make sure it's not a McDojo or something like that? Now, I've got a whole video on McDojos, how to recognize them and all that. But, one thing, trust your gut. Again, if you go in this gym and it just seems fishy and yeah, trust your gut, man. If you got other options, go check them out. See what they have to offer. So much of what happens in an MMA gym is about putting you in the right frame of mind and the right frame of heart to get in a cage and win a fight, to make you believe that you can actually do it. Now, a big part is having an actual skilled coach and team behind you to help you physically accomplish that goal and to be able to do it physically. But you got to believe that your coach and your team can actually help you accomplish that goal, because even if it's the greatest coach in the world and you don't believe it, they're not going to help you as much as they could. So, yeah, trust your gut. What else? I guess make sure the place is clean. Because if you go in a gym and they've got dirty mats and they don't wash those mats regularly, daily, multiple times a day, that's a big deal. You know, even if the coach is skilled and the team is awesome, if the mats are dirty, and here's why that's so important: staph infections. I've said this before, if you don't want to be grossed out, do not Google Kevin Randleman staph infection, one of my favorite grapplers and mixed martial artists of all time. Kevin Randleman, rest in peace. Loved that guy. And yeah, he had one of the nastiest mat-borne staph infections ever. You do not want to get one of those, they can kill you. So make sure your gym is clean. Preferably go to a place that can teach you how to wrestle. So if they don't understand wrestling, at least on a rudimentary level, find somewhere that can teach you those skills. All right, good luck to you. Next question. Our next question comes from our friend 23NOSZZ. Are they running out of screen names, guys? Okay. He says, Master Dewey, my friend. You can call me Ramsey, you can call me Ramsey Dewey, you can call me Dewey Ramsey, you can call me Coach, but I'm no man's master. Appreciate the sentiment, but I'm no man's master. But he asks, I did a few years of kickboxing, I had a couple of fights. How hard do you think it would be to transition to MMA? And is kickboxing a good background? Yeah, I mean, it is. The more amateur experience, and amateur includes, by amateur I mean, even professional experience in other combat sports. The more amateur combat sport experience you have prior to mixed martial arts, the better. Because that's going to help get you used to all of the incidental variables that you can't train for in the gym. Being in front of a crowd, combat stress, anxiety, performance anxiety, stuff like that. Now, everybody's going to be vastly different in this regard. I came from a kickboxing background. Before I ever got in a fight cage and did mixed martial arts, I was a kickboxer. I had done striking arts for a very long time. Taekwondo, Shotokan karate, capoeira, and started out in American kickboxing. Full contact, that kind of stuff. And just when I felt I started getting a good handle on kickboxing, kickboxing started to take a big dive in popularity in the United States, and mixed martial arts started climbing up the ladder in popularity. And so I thought, okay, so I'm going to make that transition. And that was a rough transition for me. I actually won my first MMA fight. And that was probably the worst thing that could have happened to me at that point, because I didn't know anything about the sport of mixed martial arts. I went in there as a kickboxer, and if you look up my Sherdog record, which is highly inaccurate, by the way, even down to my vital statistics, it has those wrong, I don't know why. It says I won that fight with a guillotine choke. I did not. I had no clue what a guillotine choke was. Again, I was a kickboxer with zero grappling experience stepping in a fight cage. And I got lucky because I clinched up with the guy in a front headlock, which looks like a guillotine choke, and started landing liver shots, doing some dirty boxing, because that's legal in MMA. You can't hold and hit in kickboxing. So I took advantage of that. Started landing liver shots, and he crumpled onto his knees, and I kept punching him until he tapped out, and the referee ran over to stop it. And I say that was the worst thing that could have happened to me, because I felt really good about myself winning my first MMA fight. Like, hey, MMA isn't that tough. Huh. Because this guy, he had had more MMA fights than me. I had 0, he had like 3 or 4 at the time. And yeah, when you feel like you're good at something that you're not really good at, you're setting yourself up for trouble. So sometime down the line, I got in some cage fights with some people who knew how to grapple a little bit and wrestle a little bit and mix their martial arts a little bit. And I took some beatings. And I had that humbling experience a little bit too late. Time that I should have spent training for the sport of mixed martial arts instead of thinking my kickboxing alone is good enough. But since you're asking me this question, and since it's not the olden days of MMA where, we had these single emphasis styles like kickboxers go in and give it the old college try. I believe you have your head and your heart in the right place. Okay? So, go in with a humble attitude. Be humble so you don't get humbled. And you'll do just fine, as long as you put in the work. Thanks for the question. Next. Okay, I've got a number of questions about Wing Chun recently. I'm going to partially answer one of these from our friend Raj, who says, I need a favor. In one of your comment sections, you mentioned that you've seen some successful Wing Chun practitioners who trained with you. Can you please post a video for all the Wing Chun students of how we can do better, maybe some tips, and it would really help Kung Fu practitioners all over. Thanks. Okay, we're going to make a much more detailed video, probably this next week, with Jordan Chow and Nils. They are Wing Chun practitioners. Might try to get my friend Diego over here. He's an excellent Wing Chun practitioner as well. Maybe my friend Tyler. He's a Wing Chun BJJ hybrid mixed martial artist type of guy. So I'd love to get a discussion and pick their brains about this. But yeah, I've trained a bunch of Wing Chun guys over the years, and they've come to my gym to learn the sport of mixed martial arts. And you know, Wing Chun it's interesting. It gets a bad rap because you know, there are a lot of wimpy guys who you know, haven't had that humbling experience of getting into a real fight, and they've taken some Wing Chun classes, and they go out there trying to prove it, and they get beat up because they don't know what a fight is yet. I've said this before, and I'll say it here. Wing Chun addresses, I would say, about 5% of what a fight is, and please don't get angry about that, because a fight encompasses a lot of things, and Wing Chun is primarily focused on trapping and hand fighting, that range of combat. The center line, staying on the center line. Okay, fighting in that specific position. And those are important things that need to be addressed. But it's also important to realize there is that other 95% of what a fight is. And, you know, to illustrate this point, Roger Gracie, one of the great jiu-jitsu guys who transitioned to mixed martial arts, probably one of the greatest jiu-jitsu athletes in MMA, he made a lot of people angry when he said 80% of BJJ doesn't work in MMA. And a lot of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu purists, a lot of his relatives got mad, like, what are you talking about? It doesn't work. Of course it works. Everything about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu works in MMA. But, and if you stop and think about it, 80% of BJJ doesn't work in MMA. It's because, again, Jiu-Jitsu, just like all other martial arts, is a fraction of what a fight is. We could argue about that number, but I think 20%. Jiu-Jitsu addresses a good 20% at least of what a fight is. And then boxing addresses a certain percentage of that. Wrestling addresses a certain percentage of that. Muay Thai addresses a certain percentage of that. Bagua Zheng addresses a certain percentage of that. All of these arts. Okay. Now I'm going to give you one very concrete example before we continue. Now again, Wing Chun is very focused on the center line, and for all the Kung Fu lovers out there who understand Kung Fu terminology and Kung Fu styles, if you're all about Zhong Guo Gung Fu and all that, then yeah, I would say if you're a Wing Chun stylist, cross-train in Bagua Zheng, specifically because they have very opposite approaches to center line theory. So again, Wing Chun is all about staying in the center. Bagua Zheng is all about getting off the center line. And it might seem like a conflict of interests, learning two radically opposite styles, but you know what? It's a plan A and a plan B. It's a good plan A and it's a good complementary plan B. One of the best pieces of advice about fighting I ever heard was from Marcelo Garcia. He's a jiu-jitsu expert. If you haven't heard of him, he's one of the greats. He's won so many world championships, you can't shake a stick at them all. And he said, you don't need to know everything about jiu-jitsu. You don't have to have a million backup plans to be a champion. You need a good plan A and a good plan B. And if plan A fails, you go to plan B. And if plan B fails, you go back to plan A, and you keep flip-flopping until it works. That's what can fit in your head in the middle of a fight. In a fight, we don't have time to think. We react or we act. We want to be the actor in that situation, not the reactor. So yeah, center line, off the center line. Understand how to flip-flop between the two. So that's my concrete advice about that right now. And yeah, hopefully this next weekend we'll get together with some more Wing Chun practitioners and hammer out some more very concrete solutions for you. Next question. Our next question comes from our friend DSA. He says, "Hey Ramsey, what are your thoughts on training while sick?" Okay, well that depends. That depends on what you're sick with, how sick you are, how you plan to train, and who you plan to train with. If you are sick with a highly communicable disease, and by train you mean training in close contact with other people, don't. Stay home, get better. If you are sick in a way where moving and training is going to make it worse, then stay home, rest, get better. If you are sick, and I put that up in air quotes, in a way that isn't particularly serious, where it's more of a mild inconvenience than anything, where you could push through it and get stronger and benefit from it and not infect anybody with a horrible disease or make anybody else sick, then yeah, cool, do it. You also have to understand the intensity of the training. Sometimes when you're sick, your body needs to move a little bit, and sometimes it needs to rest and stay in bed. Sometimes when you're sick, again, depending on the sickness, one of the best things you can do is get up and walk around, get some air, get the blood moving a little bit. And sometimes, like I said, sit it out. So listen to your body. And respect your training partners. Don't be coughing up your lungs on them. Next question. Our next question comes from our friend Yasin X, who says, "Hey Ramsey, my son is 6 and autistic, and I want to train him in self-defense. I was wondering if you ever trained someone with special needs, and if so, do you have any tips?" Okay, yeah, I mean, I have trained a special needs girl, a girl with a form of mental retardation. I don't know what the politically correct term for that is now. It simply means slow. Here's a funny thing about special needs, and this is something I kind of hate. No matter what we call it, for some reason that term becomes politically incorrect and offensive, and then we have to pick another one. That term becomes politically incorrect and offensive. Back in the day, they used to call mental retardation idiocy, and they used to call them idiots. And then that became a slur. People would throw it out as an insult. "You're an idiot." And then they changed it to, I don't know, eventually it became to retarded. And that's what I grew up with. I had a neighbor next door who was mentally retarded. And so it's just something I always grew up around, understanding some people are like this. That's the way the world is. And then it got to a point where that became a pejorative slur. You can't say retarded anymore, call them special. And then it got to the point where that became a pejorative slur. I mean, you used to be able to say to your girlfriend, "Hey honey, I think you're so special," and that was sweet and endearing. And now it just sounds like you're saying that they have something wrong with them, and that's terrible. That's terrible. It really is. So I haven't kept up with what the terminology is. So I'm just going to say mentally retarded. So I trained this girl about 10 years old who is mentally retarded, and you know, if my goal was to train her to be a badass cage fighter, I would have been sorely disappointed. So, you know, my goal was essentially train her to have fun and enjoy what she was doing, and to keep my own expectations at a level that coexisted with her expectations. Now, I don't know, if somebody decides to do something horrible to this girl and attack her on the street or whatever, I don't know if she'd be able to intelligently defend herself. I don't. But again, that's something I understood going into the process. Now, autism, that's a different situation. I mean, there are so many different levels of autism. My friend Chris Price, he's very vocal about this. He has a form of autism, I'm not sure which one, but he is a professional fighter, and the dude is an absolute badass. And he's got an awesome story. His very first pro fight, he went in there, threw a leg kick, and he snapped his shin in half. It was one of those horror stories. Something that would have made just about any human quit and never even think about cage fighting again. And you know, he rehabbed his leg, and he got in there, and he did it again, and he did it again, and he did it again, and you know, he's making a name for himself right now. And this is a guy who was bullied because of his autism, and you know, he pushed himself, and he rose above it. And the dude's an awesome guy, and he's even got this great, hilarious self-defense video out there that everybody should watch. So, man, Chris, if you're watching, man, I love you, dude. You're an inspiration. And I know some people very close to me who have autism as well, and a lot of people, I hate the public perception of autism. And I get mad a lot when talking to friends of mine who are anti-vaccination. Not so much because they say don't vaccinate your kids and they want to bring back smallpox or whatever it is, but more so when they say don't vaccinate because it will cause autism. And a big part of me, because there's so many people that I know and love who have autism, it just makes me think, so? And what's the big deal? So again, I'm not sure what form of autism your son has or how severe it is. I haven't worked personally with many people with autism as far as coaching mixed martial arts goes, but you know, be patient, be persistent, manage your expectations, and you know, maybe look up my friend Chris Price. He might be able to give you some advice about that, since it's something that he's dealt with personally. Anyway, good luck to you and your son. Next question. Our next question comes from an anonymous viewer. At least I'm going to keep his name anonymous, because he's training at a gym and he's got an issue and he kind of wants to keep it on the down low. He doesn't want to offend his coaches or his team or anything. But he's at an MMA gym. He's been training there for a while, and they do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and they do kickboxing. But it's a mixed martial arts gym. At least that's how they market themselves. And but they never do any MMA sparring. They never mix their martial arts. They never train specifically for the sport of MMA. And this is like a red flag going off in his head. He's like, I want to train for the sport of MMA. I want to be able to do that style of sparring, but we never do. So he wants to know, what should he do? Should he leave and go somewhere else? Okay, well, I'd say first, talk to your coach about that. I mean, he might have some deep concerns about that. A lot of people are afraid of that. There are a lot of otherwise really great gyms out there who market themselves as MMA gyms that never, ever do MMA sparring. And that's a shame, and I think a lot of it is they don't know how, or they're afraid of losing control, or the students will lose control and hurt each other with the smaller gloves on. But again, as long as you take some simple precautions, then yeah, you can safely train MMA sparring. So your coach may not know how to do that right now. Maybe he does, and maybe he has some good reason for his method. But talk to him about that. And if you can hash it out between the two of you, great. More power to you. And if not, if you simply cannot get what you need from this gym, move on. Find somewhere where you can. Next question. Our next question also comes from an anonymous viewer who says, hey Ramsey, do you have any theories about the upcoming Avengers movie? Okay, well, I said, hey, send me any types of questions, I'll be happy to answer. The upcoming Avengers movie. Yeah, I'm excited to see that. saw the last one. I'm a big comic book fan, got a lot of comic books at home, but at the same time, being a comic book nerd can be really frustrating going into comic book movies because they change everything. And it's kind of funny. I used to go to these movies with my wife, and because, you know, I love comics and I've read so many of them, she would always look over me and say, what's happening? You've read the comics, and my answer was always, this didn't happen in the comics, sorry. So, I gotta go. But my theory, Ant-Man was Thanos the whole time. Thanks for watching. Get out there and train.